Hello, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Federal Crowdsourcing webinar series. Today we are presenting episode 2, where we are focusing the discussion on prize competitions. My name is Jara Metter, and I'm the director of the Challenge.gov program at the General Services Administration. My co-host for today is Jessie Berlin from Health and Human Services, and she will be sharing her team's experiences developing and implementing a prize portfolio focused on maternal and child health. Today I will begin with an overview of the use of and benefits of prize competitions. This will be followed with a description of a variety of prize competition types and the legal authorities that permit federal agencies to utilize this type of crowdsourcing. I will conclude my portion of the presentation with some information about the Challenge.gov program. Prize competitions have been in use across federal government for many years. Compared to more traditional programming, prize competitions offer an exciting avenue for the public to engage directly with federal agencies to solve mission-related problems. Prize competitions have been used to develop autonomous vehicles, to tackle infectious disease forecasting, and to curb the tide of annoying robocalls, to name a few. Prize competitions have also proved to be useful mechanisms for stimulating market investment across different sectors such as solar energy and small business development. Prize competitions also allow an agency to establish an ambitious goal while not being prescriptive of the specific process by which a solution is developed. Prize competitions are designed to greatly reduce the barrier to entry for public participation and to allow federal agencies the ability to tap into the collective intelligence of the crowd and to reach individuals and entities that may be new to working with the government to develop solutions. Using a low barrier to entry approach for participation, a competitive structure, and well-defined rules, prize competitions can inspire risk-taking by innovators and offer a level playing ground for evaluators and reviewers to select the winning submissions and solutions.
There are a diversity of prize competition types. Some prize competitions encourage the crowd to develop analytics, so data visualization, predictive analytics, and algorithms. An example of an analytics challenge would be one from the Veterans Affairs called the Pseudovet Challenge, where the goal was to design a synthetic patient data engine. Also, we've seen a lot of interesting ideation challenges where you're asking the crowd to come forward with their best strategies or ideas to promote a solution around a specific topic. We've seen some design competitions recently that are very interesting. One would be from NASA. It's called the Artists Inspiring Astronauts Challenge. We also see some architectural design competitions where you're really just asking the crowd to come forward with their most creative and most appropriate designs. We've seen scientific competitions where it's asking the crowd to really promote the understanding of a problem, solution, or outcome using scientific method and measurable practices. Jessie will describe some technology development competitions out of HHS. Department of Energy has also been a pioneer in developing technology solution and demonstration competitions, such as the Wave Energy Prize. We've seen some exciting entrepreneurship competitions come out of the Small Business Administration, as well as HHS with their substance use disorder startup competition recently. We also have some IT and development and software challenges where agencies are asking the crowd to come up with innovative applications to address a specific goal in a competition. So prize competitions are not new to government. One competition that many of you may have heard of is the Longitude Prize. This competition was launched in 1714 by the British government. And in that competition, they were seeking to develop new technologies that would allow seafarers to accurately determine longitude while at sea. Latitude was much easier to determine based on position of the sun, but longitude really presented a unique challenge. And so they launched the competition. The prize amount was approximately £20,000. And the winner of that competition was a young watchmaker named John Harrison. Another competition that's kind of near and dear to the audience in Washington, D.C. is the D.C. Flag Design Competition. This competition was sponsored by Congress and came about because for many years, the District of Columbia did not have a representative flag to fly. And so this is an example of a design competition. The winner was Charles Dunn, and he actually was a flag designer, and he produced the design based on George Washington's family coat of arms. So prize competitions in the federal government. More than 100 federal agencies to date have run over 1,000 prize competitions since gaining legal authority, broad legal authority in 2010. These prize competitions have offered more than $250 million in cash prizes, as well as other non-monetary incentives. Many federal agencies for decades have had direct prize authority. Some of those agencies are Department of Defense, NASA, DOE, NSF, and then recently USAID. But the federal government saw that there was a need for all federal agencies to be able to participate in and utilize prize competitions as a sourcing mechanism. And so in 2010, the America Creating Opportunities to Meaningfully Promote Excellence in Technology, Education, and Science, otherwise known as the Competes Reauthorization Act, was placed into law. And so this broad authority granted each head of an agency or heads of multiple agencies in cooperation that they may carry out a prize program to award prizes competitively to stimulate innovation that has the potential to advance the mission of the respective agency. And since 2010, we've really seen year after year an exponential increase in the use of prize competitions across the far reaches of federal government and across a diversity of different topics. In 2017, Congress passed the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act, which provided an expansion on the Competes Act as far as providing further guidance on some aspects of prize competitions to include funding, partnerships, as well as requirements for announcing prize competitions. Although every federal agency has, by law, has prize authority, many agencies choose to run their prize competitions using other legal authorities, such as procurement and assistance. The decision of which authority to utilize in a prize competition really comes down to that agency's specific goals in their prize competition, as well as the administration of the prize competition. So the Challenge.gov program was established in 2010 through the America Competes Act, where in that act, it specifically mandated that the General Services Administration would facilitate the use of prizes and competitions across federal government. GSA decided that one of the ways in which we would satisfy this mandate was to launch a centralized platform and program that would allow for any federal agency to post their prize competition in one place, as well as to provide for that guidance and training that's necessary. And so our mandate is to serve as a champion for open innovation in federal government. And the Challenge.gov program really offers resources, consultations, and training for the federal prizes and challenges community. We satisfy this through an online prizes toolkit that you'll see in a minute is hosted on the Challenge.gov website. We also convene and support the network of prize practitioners across federal government. We have a network of greater than 730 prize practitioners that are part of this community of practice. Our program also provides individualized consultation that allows anyone in federal government, anyone with a .gov email address, the opportunity to consult with our team at any stage of development in their prize competition process. We also offer in-person and virtual trainings for this community of practice, just to make sure that we're sharing knowledge and keeping up to date on best practices. And as I mentioned earlier, the Challenge.gov program includes a crowdsourcing platform. And this platform has been in existence since 2010. The platform allows any federal agency to post their prize competition. As you'll see on the platform, when you go to Challenge.gov, every prize competition is represented as an individual tile. And whenever you click on that tile, as I'll show you in a minute, you're able to see the full content and overview of that challenge. The platform also provides information about prize competitions, the use of prize authority across federal government, and we also provide the prize toolkit that I mentioned earlier on the platform. And so whenever you click on an individual challenge, here I'm showing you the Gear Center Challenge. The Gear Center Challenge is a recent prize competition that was launched in partnership between Office of Management and Budget and GSA. And whenever you click on this challenge, what you'll see is that you have a tab that represents an overview of the challenge. And so in the overview section of a challenge, you'll see the background that describes the problem that the prize competition addresses. You'll also be able to see the rules of the prize competition. And the rules will include all of the information regarding eligibility and terms and conditions for participation. You'll also be able to look into the judging criteria to get a sense of how your submission might be evaluated. Once winners are selected, you'll be able to see the distribution of the winners for that competition under the prizes tab. And then finally, you'll be able to understand how you as a solver will be able to enter and participate in the challenge. The prizes toolkit is, as I mentioned, is an incredible resource. This resource was developed in collaboration with the prizes and challenges community, prize leads across federal government. This toolkit provides an overview of the different types of prize competitions that I mentioned earlier, different goals that prize competitions typically set forward at the beginning in the planning stages, as well as the stages of development of a competition, all the way from design, problem definition, through to execution of a prize competition. You'll also be able to find some very rich resources that our agency prize leads have made available on this site. These resources include templates for things like a communication outreach strategy, formulations for how to structure your judging panel, judging rubrics, along with kind of the nuts and bolts information like how do you pay winners of a prize competition. And so I encourage each of you to consult with the prizes toolkit on the website to look at the case studies. We have dozens of case studies presented that are kind of a compendium, a look back on some of the interesting and diverse prize competitions that have been launched across federal government. You'll also be able to see on the site the mentor network. And so we have several mentors across federal agencies. If you're at a federal agency now and thinking about running a prize competition, I encourage you to look there in the early stages, because you might be able to find that champion just down the hallway who can really be an advocate and help you with all the information that you need to understand to run a competition at your agency. And so that provides a basic overview of prize competitions, federal use of prize competitions and legal authority, along with an overview of the Challenge.gov program and the Challenge.gov platform resources. And so I encourage any of you that are interested in learning more about prize competitions to reach out to our team at team@challenge.gov. You can also follow us via social media on Twitter and Facebook. And also, if you have a .gov email address, you can reach out to us at team@challenge.gov and ask to be added to that robust listserv that I mentioned earlier. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my co-presenter, Jessie.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jara and the Challenge.gov team for having me today. As I mentioned, I'm here to share our experience developing and implementing our challenge portfolio at the Maternal and Child Health Bureau. So what I'm going to do is start by providing a description of the first large-scale challenge that we implemented in 2015 and talk about some of the lessons learned from our experience there and how we're now applying those to the 4 concurrent challenges that we're running, which we're referring to as the MCHB Grand Challenges. Each addresses a different issue around maternal and child health, and there's a total prize purse of $1.5 million for the Grand Challenges. And just on a personal note, this is my first day back from maternity leave. So this time away has certainly given me even more perspective about our mission at the Maternal and Child Health Bureau and what we're trying to accomplish with each challenge. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with you all today. So the Health Resources and Services Administration is the primary federal agency responsible for improving healthcare for people who are geographically isolated and economically or medically vulnerable. As you can see, our programs focus on improving access to healthcare, strengthening the workforce, building healthy communities, and improving health equity. So the Maternal and Child Health Bureau sits within HRSA, and our mission is to improve the health of America's mothers, children, and families. And we envision an America where all children have their best chance at reaching their fullest potential. So Jira has gone over some of the benefits to federal agencies of embracing the prize competition mechanism, and you can see some of those listed here. But when we developed our first challenge at MCHB, we were really excited about the twofold opportunity that challenges offer to both generate new ideas and solutions, but especially to engage new people and attract non-traditional partners outside of our typical grantees and contractors that we often work with. We were excited about mobilizing new combinations of talent in the field and bringing new thinking and the best thinking to existing issues that affect the maternal and child health population. So our Bridging the Word Gap Challenge was launched in 2015. It was part of the previous administration Office of Science and Technology Policies initiative around the word gap. And at the Maternal and Child Health Bureau, we decided to make 2 investments as part of this initiative. One was funding a research network to help support the state of the science around the word gap and interventions for parents. And then for the second investment, we wanted to try our hand at a prize competition. And the goal here was to generate technology-based solutions that were really designed specifically for parents and caregivers. So briefly, the word gap itself refers to the difference in the quality of child-directed language within higher compared to lower income households. The initial study in 1995 reported that by age 3, children in lower income households were exposed to 30 million fewer words than their higher income peers. But subsequent studies have shown that the quality of the early home language environment, independent of socioeconomic status, is really vital to the development of language skills. And so we see this period beginning at birth as a window of opportunity for intervention for all children and families. And so that's why we're focusing on the word gap. We know that hearing words and language interactions are the fuel for almost all later cognitive development. So not just the parts of the brain responsible for speech or learning, but also the parts that regulate impulse and emotion and that are so critical to success in school and later in life. We know that vocabulary is key to later literacy, school readiness, and a host of other life outcomes. And unfortunately, once early gaps in vocabulary are established, they're likely to widen rather than diminish over time without intervention. So the good news is that we do have evidence-based strategies for reducing the word gap, but we need to bring those interventions to scale. Talking, reading, and playing more with children are those key ingredients to promoting children's language, but we know that parents of all socioeconomic backgrounds may not know the importance of speaking words as early as birth or understand their critical role in providing a language environment for their children. So the challenge statement that we crafted was to develop low-cost, scalable, technology-based solutions that would help parents to engage in more high quality back and forth interactions with their young children. I know that that's a mouthful. In hindsight, we probably would have shortened it. So I want to talk a little bit about how we designed our challenge, because for us, this was really a critical factor to the success of the Word Gap Challenge, and it's also the structure that we're using for those 4 challenges that we're running right now, which I'll describe in more detail later. So we designed this in 3 phases, from ideation to incubation to scaling. So for phase 1, we wanted to create a really low barrier to entry for application. We wanted to attract, as I mentioned, those non-traditional partners, folks who may not be comfortable engaging with government or have a DUNS number where they can apply for a grant. So we just asked for a less than 5-page description of an idea for an innovation that would address the word gap for parents and caregivers. We awarded a small amount of seed funding, $10,000, to those 10 best ideas. And then we moved them on to phase 2, where they were responsible for actually building or developing the innovation that they described, and actually doing some small scale testing on the target end users, so families and parents themselves. And the goal here was really to get that user feedback throughout development and make constant improvement. So that was a 6-month period. At the end of this, we awarded the 5 most promising innovations with another cash prize of $25,000 each. And then we moved those teams to the 3rd and final phase of our challenge, the scaling phase, where we really asked them to create a plan for reaching a large number of families at low or no cost to those families. You know, once they have a viable innovation, how would they bring it to market? And at the very end, we awarded our final winner a $75,000 grand prize. So as I mentioned, we feel that this tiered structure has worked really well for us, and there's 3 main reasons for that. The first is that this structure has allowed multiple solutions to come to fruition. So as I mentioned, we did have 1 final grand prize winner, but with this seed funding, we helped to support 10 very different, unique approaches to the word gap issue. Second, the iterative process allows for constant improvement and incorporating user feedback to result in the best final innovation. So as opposed to a grant or a contract where you may be paying for a final product up front, this has really allowed the teams to realize what's working, but also what's not working, and really come up with a final solution that's taken family input into account throughout. And then finally, an unanticipated benefit of this structure was that the 10 teams themselves created their own learning community. They brought really different skills and approaches and backgrounds to the same issue. So it was really rewarding to see how they interacted with and supported each other throughout the challenge. I just have a photo of a demo day that we hosted at the end of phase 2. We brought the 10 teams to the HHS headquarters to do our federal Shark Tank and pitch their innovations. And this was the day where we announced those 5 phase 2 winners. We did hear from these teams that demo day, as well as other opportunities for networking and connection, the resources that we provided was a really large non-monetary incentive to their continued participation in the challenge. So that was a learning for us as well. I just want to share those 5 phase 3 teams. I mentioned that while we did have 1 final winner, all of these 5 innovations are actually available on iTunes and Google Play now to the public. So we feel that we helped to proliferate multiple solutions to address the word gap. And I just wanted to show an example. This is the Starling. This was submitted by a Silicon Valley startup. It's a hardware and software solution. It's a star that clips onto a baby and measures words in real time. It provides feedback through an app to the parents to kind of encourage additional words or verbal interaction depending on the daily count. And then the Hablame Bebe team was our grand prize winner. These were 3 researchers who teamed up with different perspectives and created a dual language app that encourages parents to build on their cultural strengths and their native tongue to reduce the word gap using the concept of words as language nutrition. So I just want to take a moment to mention that Beyond Demo Day and beyond the challenge itself, at HRSA, Maternal and Child Health Bureau, we've really tried to be thoughtful about ways to support these teams once the challenge has finished. So we've tried to facilitate connections not only with government, but with others in the field who could provide information and mentorship, fostered partnerships, and we've also tried to ensure access to target audiences. One way that we've done this is provide newsletters and webinars for our grantees who are in the early childhood workforce. So for example, our home visiting program, which is in every state, we've hosted a webinar so that home visitors know that these apps are available and that they can be encouraged to use them with the families that they work with. So I want to share some lessons learned from our Word Gap Challenge. Again, this has kind of informed the structure for the 4 challenges that we are implementing now. As I mentioned, the structure allowed the proliferation of multiple solutions versus one final intervention. And again, having that low barrier to entry in phase 1 was really important. I mentioned that we were looking for non-traditional partners, and in addition to some of the teams that I mentioned that represented academia or local nonprofits or a Silicon Valley startup, we also had a middle school student who applied, as well as a group of farmers. So we did kind of reach those non-traditional audiences, and we were really excited about that. Again, the iterative process led to more user feedback and improved solutions. One of the pieces of evaluation criteria developed by our judges was the concept of stickiness. So we kind of built in criteria that would encourage the teams to be thinking about what would make families continuously engage with these innovations, so that once they'd used it once, kind of the shine didn't wear off and they would be motivated to continue to use this, and that it would fit very easily into a busy family's life. Again, the challenge winners represented really diverse strengths and weaknesses. And something that I haven't talked a lot about, the advisors and the federal judges were key to our challenge success. In addition to having the federal judges that most challenges typically have, we also had a set of external advisors who represented expertise in early childhood as well as the technology field, and we matched them up with each team to provide one-on-one mentoring during phase 2. We found this to be really valuable for those teams, and they mentioned it over and over again as a great incentive for continued participation. And then lastly, within government, prizes can themselves present multiple challenges. You know, anytime you are embracing a new mechanism that can come with some challenges. We learned that as an agency, we needed a little bit more familiarity with the Competes Act and the flexibility that it offers, but we were really fortunate to have the team at GSA as well as the HHS Idea Lab to really help us in terms of providing that support and even connecting us with other divisions or agencies who had kind of gone down the path before us or encountered similar challenges. And that was incredibly helpful, and that's one of the reasons that we're so excited to be a part of this greater challenges community. Thank you. Skipped ahead too quickly. So now I just want to provide a quick overview of our MCHB grant challenges, which we are currently implementing with a prize purse of $1.5 million. Each of these challenges has awarded the phase 1 winners, and so you can read more on our website about who the winners are, and they're all in phase 2. Let's see. So the first challenge is the Preventing Childhood Obesity in Low-Income Families and Communities Challenge. The goal of this is to use technology to address the barriers families may face when they're trying to build a healthy lifestyle. And one thing I'll mention for this and all of our challenges is that similar to the Word Gap, we've brought in a team of external advisors who bring forth expertise not only in the specific content area, but who also represent technology or programming and will be providing that mentorship role. So here is a snapshot of our phase 1 winners. Some examples of the winning innovations include an interactive virtual health coach avatar, motivational texting, and telehealth breastfeeding support. Next, we have our Care Coordination for Children with Special Healthcare Needs Challenge. The goal of this competition is to use health information technology to organize data from different sources into one patient-centered record. And the key end user for this challenge is families who often have that role of coordinating their child's care. Again, we have a lot of diversity among the winners who come from all over the country. And some examples of these innovations are apps with cloud-based support and data sharing through voice-enabled artificial intelligence. Our third challenge is addressing opioid misuse in pregnant women and new moms. And we know that women and new moms who struggle with opioid use disorder face a variety of barriers when they seek care and treatment. So the goal of this challenge is to use technology to help women access treatment and recovery services while caring for their babies and families. Here's a snapshot of the Phase 1 winners for this challenge, and some examples of winning innovations are remote patient monitoring and an online support community for recovery specialists. Our final challenge is remote pregnancy monitoring. This challenge supports technology-based solutions that help both providers remotely monitor pregnant women's health, as well as empower women themselves to make informed decisions about their own care. And this especially targets providers and families in rural and frontier areas where it may be harder to access the multiple prenatal visits that are a part of pregnancy. And then our winners for this challenge include wearable devices, remote patient monitoring, and a hybrid of telehealth and home visits. So I just want to briefly share, I mentioned some of the lessons learned from a federal perspective, but Jara had asked me to discuss some of what we're hearing from the participants themselves. So we have a couple of themes of feedback that we've heard, and I just pulled out a few quotes that reflect those. The first theme is that the straightforward application process greatly increases participation. So I won't read this quote to you, it's a bit long, but as you can see, this person is not as excited about a super long grant application with complex formatting requirements. However, the low barrier to entry for our challenge created a really positive experience and was their recommendation for how government could continue to attract innovation from places like Silicon Valley. Again, a theme that we're hearing over and over again is that the mentorship, the partnering, the networking, and even the recognition opportunities of being a part of a federal challenge are powerful motivators, not just for applying, but for continuing through the 3 phases. Again, people have mentioned that this multi-phase challenge design is really helpful in terms of providing lessons learned and those feedback loops during the development stage, versus after something has been created and then tested. And then finally, we've heard that it's been a really rewarding, positive experience for the teams. I think especially some of those teams that represent more of the technology piece and less of the programming side, requiring them to work with families throughout the challenge has been really powerful and has really given them a new perspective about the innovations that they're creating. And so this final quote kind of speaks to, folks have said that their perception of HRSA and our mission has really changed. They see, the passion that we have about serving families. And so finally, a few concluding thoughts are just that for us, our portfolio of challenges have really been a complement to other HRSA and Maternal and Child Health Bureau investments, but we really do feel like we've been able to tap into a market that hasn't collaborated with HRSA thus far, or at least in this way. So we're excited to kind of build, to borrow a term from Jara, an ecosystem of innovation around our mission, and I'm excited to share that with you today. Just wanted to let you know that we'll also be holding a demo day for our 4 current challenges. It'll take place at HRSA headquarters in September, and there will be more details to come, and just wanted to share my contact information. Thanks very much.
And here's the information for connecting with Jesse's team over at HRSA. Thank you for that amazing overview of your portfolio of prizes and grand challenges. And so I'd like to also provide you with a little bit of an update about some upcoming events. As we mentioned at the very beginning, this is episode 2 of a larger series. We invite you to join us again every episode is the second Tuesday of the month. And so the next episode, episode 3, will be June 11th. And that episode will highlight the Opportunity Project, which is a crowdsourcing program out of the Census Bureau, and that program is headed by Drew Zachary, and she'll be providing an overview of their process. And then in July, we'll be featuring a federal-wide program hosted out of OPM called OPM Open Opportunities, and Lisa Nelson, the director of that program, will be providing an overview. And then in August, we'll have episode 5 hosted by Lauren Algie, and she'll be discussing a program over at the Library of Congress, their labs, called History by the People. And this program will highlight some of the work that Library of Congress is doing to engage the crowd around, they call it citizen humanities, and a lot of their focus is on digital transcription. And so with that, we're happy to open up the conversation to answer any questions that you participants in our audience may have for us at this time. So while we're waiting for our moderators to decide which amazing questions to lob over to us over the transom, I wanted to ask you, Jessie, I noticed in your structure that you provide seed funding at the earliest stage of your competition. How did you make that decision to provide seed funding? Because I know a lot of prize competitions are modeled as all or nothing, pay for the best at the end of it. So how did you make that decision?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, we were really excited about using this mechanism to bring really different types of thinking to the challenge process. And so we knew that, for example, the middle school student that applied, there would be people bringing ideas to the table that wouldn't have the capacity to continue in the challenge through the remaining phases without some small pot of money that could help support them. So that was our decision to really look at which ideas had promise that did have, capacity in terms of time and the right staff, but who did need a little bit more support to continue through phase 2. And seeing the promise of those ideas, we wanted to really help to support as many as we could to move forward.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions for you that have been trickling in. So one question, Jessie, specifically on the work that HRSA has done and on the Bridging the Word Gap Challenge. One registrant asks, can you provide more detail about the opportunities that you provided that led the solvers to develop their community?
Sure. And so I think that you mean by that question kind of the internal community among the teams of solvers. Absolutely. So we hosted some office hours, conference calls. We provided opportunities for the teams to share their progress, to connect with each other, and kind of highlight common questions and themes and challenges as we went forward. Often we would work with our different expert advisors to also offer office hours. So for example, we had advisors with expertise in early childhood, and we also had advisors with expertise in app development. So we kind of created learning opportunities for them. And then I think probably the biggest example of that was this demo day where we funded the travel for all of the teams to come to HHS to Washington, D.C. We had a networking event the night before, and then we provided kind of panels of resources which represented government as well as small businesses in the community as resources for them. So they had several days to be together, to interact, to learn from speakers, and to connect with each other. I think after that is when they also really started, reaching out to each other, sharing opportunities, sharing funding announcements. And we know that many of them, are still in touch and still support and announce each other's innovations.
That's great, thank you. That's great, thank you. Also related to that challenge, can you share a little bit more about how Phase 1 winners test their projects during Phase 2?
Sure, that's a very good question. So in Phase 2, we do require, as we call it, small scale testing. So we really want to make sure that the teams are testing their innovation on the end user, as I mentioned, and taking that feedback to continuously improve the development of their innovation. We've let the teams describe to us what that plan will look like. So as you may imagine, with such a diversity of solvers, we have a lot of different strengths, experiences in terms of doing this small scale testing. So, we may have a team from academia who is very comfortable with a randomized control trial type structure, and will submit a plan for having, for example, a control group and an intervention group monitoring outcomes over a few months. And on the other hand, we may have a private citizen with an idea who's more comfortable hosting some focus groups with parents and caregivers. And so we've accepted different types of plans that the teams have given us. They are all evaluated according to the same evaluation criteria that's on our website and been discussed thoroughly with the teams. But in terms of what eliciting that user feedback looks like, it can be very different from team to team. And this is also a place where they're relying heavily on that one-on-one mentor opportunity with the advisor that we've connected them to. So kind of going over what that plan looks like and getting feedback to make sure that it makes sense and that they've kind of thought through some of the challenges that might arise.
Thank you, Jessie. Going back to a couple of questions about challenges as a whole, can you talk a little bit more about the difference between challenges and grants?
Sure. So challenges or prize competitions, that terminology is often used interchangeably. And with prize competitions, if you use the America Competes Act as your legal authority, then the difference between a grant or a contract is actually quite vast. Grants or contracts are actually governed under the Federal Acquisition Regulation, otherwise known as the FAR. And within the FAR, there are certain criteria for grantees and contractors that they must adhere to. Some of those are intellectual property, for example. Anytime the government funds an initiative via a grant or a contract, the government does have the right to express some form of ownership of that intellectual property. Also, through FAR-based mechanisms, the government is able to require those grantees or contractors to have in place a sophisticated accounting system for that project. With prize competitions, using prize authority, the government actually encourages agencies not to seek any form of ownership of intellectual property that results from a prize competition. Also, the requirements, as we've mentioned repeatedly in this conversation, for submitting to a prize competition are greatly reduced compared to a grant or a contract. Prize competitions and prize authority allows federal agencies to enter into partnerships with other federal agencies as well as the private sector to administer prize competitions. And so that allows for really a dynamic experience for participants in a prize competition, and also allows some level of exposure of that participant to other sectors for the innovation that might be developed as part of the prize competition. And so going back to one of the kind of low barrier to entry aspects of a prize competition compared to grants and contracts, typically whenever you think of grants and contracts, you often think of the selection criteria in the process for evaluation and judging. With prize competitions, we really do encourage federal agencies to not bias where they might receive submissions or innovations for the program. As Jessie showed in the slides of really the diversity of her phase 1 selectees, by creating a low barrier to entry and not biasing the level of experience of the submitter, you're really able to open up that playing field to source transformational innovations from entities and individuals that may not have ever interacted with the government before.
Thank you. Speaking of solvers and people who interact with government, I suspect this next question comes from someone who works for the federal government. And the question is, can individuals who work for the federal government participate in prize competitions and win prizes?
That is a great question. It's also a complex question. So if the focus of that prize competition is directly related to the job, your job description, and the scope of your work in the federal government, you are not allowed to participate in that prize competition. If, however, the scope of the prize competition is not related to your duties for the federal government, you are able to participate by law, but we highly encourage you to seek guidance from your ethics and general counsel at your agency before you do participate. And taking it a step further, beyond just participation as a solver, as a federal employee, you do need to take note of the amount of time and or resources that you might make available or avail your expertise to a particular participant in a challenge. You need to make sure that any time or resources that you make available, that it is fair and equitable to all participants of a prize competition.
Great, thank you. Kind of switching gears and going back to the HRSA challenges. One registrant apologizes that they've missed this, but they wanted to know how long the HRSA challenges ran.
That's a great question. So for our initial large-scale challenge, the Bridging the Work Gap Challenge, it was a little over a year. And so we're following the same structure for our current 4 challenges. So we're in phase 2. Phase 1 was really just eliciting those innovative ideas. So we had about a 2-month application process. Now that we have identified the 7 to 10 phase 1 winners, they have 6 months for that small scale testing phase. When we award the best innovations, we'll have another 6 months for phase 3. And then at the end of that phase, we announce the final winners. So a little over a year in total, but really 6 months for phase 2 and 6 months for phase 3. And we're currently in phase 2 for our 4 MCHB grand challenges.
Okay, great, thank you. One registrant wants to know a little bit more about what happened with the word gap and where winners are now.
Sure. So as I mentioned, those 5 phase 3 teams, the phase 2 winners, all created an app that became available on iTunes and Google Play to the public. So we know that those are out in the field. They're being used by parents and caregivers. We do know also that as part of their participation in this challenge, some of those teams have gone on to secure additional funding for research, additional federal grants. We know that some have made partnerships with major sports teams or Univision. We've heard of some speaking at early childhood conferences and really reaching the early childhood workforce. So we know that they are out in the field and being widely used. As I mentioned again, we've tried to be thoughtful about connecting these innovations to our grantees. So whenever we can, we'll host a webinar or include an electronic newsletter information about where to download the apps so that we can ensure that families are aware and that our early childhood workforce is also aware of these innovations. But they are out and being used widely, we're happy to say.
Okay, great, thanks. We want to encourage folks who are on the line to go ahead and continue posting their questions if they have any. We've got a couple more minutes. Jesse and Jara, if there's anything you'd like to add.
What would you say from the Word Gap Challenge was the thing that surprised you the very most?
That's a great question. I think I would say, really just the different types of solvers that we got. This was our first experience running a large scale challenge. We really had no idea what to expect. We tried to get the word out as broadly as we could. We didn't know if we would reach audiences beyond kind of our typical recipients of our newsletter. So to see the folks who applied with really thoughtful, interesting ideas, again, as I mentioned, a middle school student, a group of farmers, a local community-based nonprofits was really exciting. And I think one of the surprising pieces for that challenge too was when we were going through the federal judging process to select the top 10, all of the submissions were very high quality. So I think we were surprised by that too. We weren't really sure what to expect, but there were so many wonderful ideas, and we were just, we wish that we could have funded more. So I think we were pleasantly surprised by the quality of the applications that we received.
Jessie, you mentioned that this was one of the first large-scale challenges that your team had run. From a resources perspective, if you set aside the prize money, from a resources perspective internally, what did that look like in terms of managing this challenge on a day-to-day basis, and what kind of folks did you have to work with to get it up and running and to sustain it through completion?
Sure, that's a great question. So I will say perhaps that was unanticipated at first, the level of staff time that it does take to kind of get a challenge off the ground. So I think probably a full-time staff position is one of the resources that we had. I will say the workload, it varies according to the phases, the way that we've set it up. So it's very intensive in terms of developing initially the outline for the challenge, identifying our expert advisors, inviting them to participate, convening them to kind of come up with the submission questions, as well as the evaluation criteria, and then getting the word out heavily for people to apply. So there are different times during the life course of the challenge that I think are a bit more time intensive for federal staff. However, for example, we're now in the phase 2 period, so the teams are kind of off and running for 6 months and developing their innovations. So we check in with them periodically, but it's not quite as time intensive, as it initially was. Of course, we relied on many different types of staff people. We've awarded a contract to help support our current challenges as well as the word gap. So working with contract staff as well, working with our communications team to spread the word, to do social media, and to engage new audiences. But it definitely has taken really dedicated staff time, and we do have staff who specifically support each of the 4 challenges at MCHB.
Thank you, Jessie. One question just in. This registrant would like to know, how much did mentors get paid? So mentors who assisted, how were they compensated?
Sure. So we did and do provide our expert advisors with a very small honorarium for each of the phases for the work that they do. So it's really more a labor of love on their part. We like to think that it's a really exciting opportunity for them as experts in the field to kind of partner with federal staff and to do something new and creative. So we've found that inviting these experts, most of them have been absolutely thrilled to participate. And, while they've accepted the honorarium, I think it's really been a fun experience for them. And, we have their bios up on our website, and we kind of do our best to promote their participation. But we've heard from them that it's been a really valuable experience. It's a different type of interaction with government than they're often used to having. Some of them may be grantees or, may have experience in receiving federal funding. But again, they've been really excited to help craft these challenges. So we've really invited them from the very beginning. So at the kickoff for each challenge, we have brought our advisors into DC or hosted a virtual meeting where we've really asked them to help us design, nuances to these phases, help craft the questions that we're asking folks to answer, and then make sure that the evaluation criteria is really reflective of what we want to accomplish. So I think it's given them a lot of ownership over the challenge. And again, we've let them select the team that they provide mentorship to, and that's also been a really positive experience. They've really enjoyed kind of seeing these creative ideas come to life, and to be the ones to kind of provide feedback and watch that move through the phases. They've said it's been a great experience. But yes, we provided a small monetary incentive, less than $500 per advisor. So I think it's really participation in the challenge itself that's been the biggest incentive.
Thank you, Jessie. So the two of you have represented enough, together combined have represented a few different agencies running prize competitions. And so this next question comes from someone who says, can you speak to your leadership approval process or involvement with your challenge and how that's looked for both of you?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So, our leadership has been very involved in these challenges. As I mentioned, the Word Gap Challenge was part of a larger administration effort at the time. So leadership was, excited to embrace a prize competition as a way of supporting that initiative, and was very involved in kind of finding advisors, creating this three-phase structure, and implementing the challenge. Our 4 MCHB grand challenges that we're currently running reflect our agency priorities around maternal and child health right now. So as I mentioned, remote monitoring of care, the opioid epidemic, to name a few. And so leadership, has been really engaged in saying, what would an issue be that would lend itself well to a challenge where we're also supporting this effort through grants and contracts. So that's kind of how we've approached it. And then on a larger scale, as I mentioned before, we've certainly had a lot of support from the GSA team and from the HHS IDEA Lab when we've encountered any challenges or questions that we didn't have the answers to, whether that was legal or questions from participants that we didn't know how to answer. So in that sense, I feel that we've been really supported by the agency in terms of implementing these when we haven't necessarily had all of the answers within HRSA.
So I've led prize competitions at a few agencies. And what I found really echoes what Jessie is saying is that I found that leadership at agencies typically fully supports prize competitions and as a new avenue for reaching solvers in a way that makes sense for how those solvers want to engage with government agencies. And I found that that also, aside from the top level leadership at agencies, that your subject matter experts at agencies are often very enthusiastically supportive of working with teams to develop prize competitions so that they can solve problems that perhaps their traditional grant making or procurement processes are not able to solve. And so prize competitions, I've found at a variety of layers or levels of leadership. I found it to be widely accepted. Although if you're at an agency where prize competitions may be a totally new term to your leadership, what I've found to be successful in those situations is that you work to really understand, first off, the problem that you're trying to address, really define that problem, and then do the analysis to determine if other forms of sourcing, grant making, procurement, collaboration, partnership, if they're able to be the modality that you use that can solve that problem. If after that due diligence, you determine that a prize competition is the right approach to take, then I found that once you present that due diligence and your workflow to your leadership and provide them with a path for design of your competition, that leadership will oftentimes be very supportive of your approach.
Thank you. So we're at 3 o'clock. We have one more question. I think we have time to answer it. And this one is, who comes up with the challenges, and can anyone recommend a challenge idea? And if so, how can they make recommendations?
Yeah, so some agencies have position descriptions and roles of typically innovation specialists within their organization who are tasked within a program with identifying how they might use innovation mechanisms to achieve the mission of that organization. In fact, in some agencies, some folks are in the role of really leading the innovation vision to identify those areas of opportunity where prize competitions or grand challenges might be an effective sourcing tool. The approach that you typically take if you're working within an organization and you're thinking about using a prize competition, you've done the due diligence that I described earlier, the approach I would recommend is to reach out to, as a first pass, go to Challenge.gov, look to see if there's a mentor in your agency that you can connect with to help you understand the processes that they took whenever they were designing the prize competition. And then if you find that you've exhausted that mentor, or a mentor in your organization just is not there yet, maybe that will be you, then I encourage you to reach out to the Challenge.gov team, join our listserv, and then reach out to the broader, large, vast community of very helpful prize experts and practitioners to really understand how you can develop your idea. And then through that collective, kind of collaborative approach, I think that you'll be well poised, and using the resources in the toolkit on the website of Challenge.gov, you'll be well poised to present that to your leadership as an option.
Shara and Jesse, thank you so much for the information that you provided today. That concludes this episode of the Federal Crowdsourcing Webinar Series. We will certainly be encouraging all folks who've registered and participated to complete the survey following this activity to let us know what we can do to support you even more. Also, we'd like to encourage you to register for our upcoming event on June 11th with Drew Zachary on the Opportunity Project. So come hear about this fascinating project out of the U.S. Census Bureau. Thank you again for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.